Before you start to learn how to use a mobile phone. The beginning. Before you learn how to use a mobile phone, it would be a good idea to know what a mobile phone is, what it can do for you, and the different types of mobiles that are available. What is it? The modern mobile phone, often called a smartphone, is just a pocket computer that has a radio built in. Actually, multiple radios. They come in all shapes, sizes, colours and configurations. What it can do for you? Many, many, many things. So many that it is impossible to list them all, although here is a rough attempt. Smartphones are the Swiss Army knife of technology. They can do far more than any other type of computer simply because of their pocket size, portability and built-in radios. Already got one or going to purchase one? If you already have a mobile phone, then you need to know what type it is, make, model and version. How do you find out? By looking at what is written on the outside case, or if you get to the inside of it, what is written on the inside. If you still have the box and documentation that came with it, what is written on that? Failing all that, somebody might know, perhaps a 16-year-old child. Purchase. If you're going to purchase one, it would be wise to know what you're going to use it for, because that can make a big difference as to which one you buy. Perhaps that's part of the reason for this video. Two broad categories. There are two broad categories of mobile phones: Apple iPhones and Android phones. Basically, they both do the same thing. It comes down to a personal preference as to which is better than the other. Apple is a computer company that has been making computers for many years and were the ones that prompted the concept of a smartphone. It is disputed that Apple were the inventors of the smartphone. All iPhones are made by Apple. Android phones are made by a number of different manufacturers. The operating system software, that is instructions that make it do what it does, that runs on Android phones is called Android and is owned by Google. The operating systems. An operating system is the major, master or control programs, that is instructions, that run computers. Remember that all smartphones are just small pocket computers. The name of the iPhone operating system is called OIS. Apparently it stands for iPhone operating system. The name of the Android phone's operating system is simply called Android. The difference. As Apple make both their operating systems, OIS, and the physical phones, iPhones, within a version of the OIS operating system, all phones operate the same way. That does not happen with Android phones. Different manufacturers of Android phones, such as Samsung and Sony, make different phones, and even though they all use the same base operating system, which is Android, they each have their own versions of the operating system. Hence, the way things are done on, say, a Samsung Android may be different to how it is done on a Sony Android phone, even within the same version of Android. More about versions a bit later on. This is because each manufacturer wants to be able to distinguish themselves from other manufacturers. It's a bit like all cars are basically the same in that they can transport you, but each car manufacturer wants to distinguish themselves from others, so saying their car is better. Is it better for you? For many years, Apple users reckoned it was better to have an Apple phone because all Apple phones worked the same and therefore were easier to learn. However, when Apple started to lose major market share to non-Apple phones, that's Android, Apple made some major enhancements to the iPhone operating system, that is OS, so much so that some users had trouble learning the new version. Hence, the perceived advantage that Apple had was lost, even though some people think it still exists. Additionally, because of the often extra functionality and so additional ways of doing exactly the same thing that the new OS version provided, the way things were done on one iPhone within the same version could be completely different to somebody else's. Different users do things different ways. The final result is that whether you use an Android or an iPhone, you may not be able to do things the same way as even somebody else with exactly the same make, model and version of phone at the operating system level. Apps. All phones have things called apps. This is an abbreviation for the word applications. There are hundreds and thousands, if not millions of apps. Hence, many of them can do the same thing, but each tends to do it slightly different way. Another kind of marketing distinction. If one company's app does things exactly the same as another, there's no difference. Companies want their apps to be distinguishable and preferably better than their oppositions. That's why we have different types of apps. Photos as an example. Practically all smartphones have the ability to take, store, show and manipulate photos and videos. There are many different types of apps, many for storing, many for showing and many for manipulating both photos and videos. Some only do photos and not videos. Some do videos and not photos. Some do both. What needs to be appreciated is that if you want to learn how to use your smartphone, that at some point you'll have to work out how to do things yourself because nobody else may have used the application in the configuration and way that you are using it. Just like different people wash dishes different ways. However, washing dishes, I suppose, is a basic thing. That is why it's important to learn concepts rather than have knowledge of how to do things. There are some apps that work on both Android and iPhones. They produce or achieve exactly the same result with subtle differences as to the user interface. User interface. If you understand the concepts of the user interface of your phone, it will be easier to learn how to use newer apps or apps that change. Be assured they will change, as opposed to just remembering rote fashion how to do something without understanding what is happening. A user interface is a way you communicate with your, in this case, phone. It is the way that you enter information, get the phone to process the information, get the phone to store the information, and see the results. For the reason I described a bit earlier, it is important that you understand how to use the user interface and why it works the way it does.